The Braves lineup piled up 28 runs over 4 games, but a sweep of the Marlins wasn't in the cards as a ninth inning lead evaporated. But Atlanta did rebound from a 4-game losing streak by claiming another series with the first meeting against the Mets looming. Welcome into BPTV. Cory McCartney and Grant McAuley with you as always. And Grant, winning the series over the Marlins was the goal, and the offense did score in bunches. But the way things ended leaves a sour taste as the Marlins overcame a 4-0 deficit against A.J. Minter.
Yeah, it really does. And I feel like it was just kind of the disappointment that, like you said, it's the last thing that you remember or the most recent thing that's on your mind when you wrap up a series. You kind of forget about, I don't know, the comeback win in game 3 or the very convincing wins in the first couple of contests. And you kind of flash back into this homestand and you think about a couple of games that got away from A.J. Minter and the Braves against the Houston Astros. So it kind of felt like you revisited what was the less fun part of the homestand in the finale of it. But like you said, and like we know, baseball is a game that requires a short-term memory. You cannot be dwelling on this and dragging it back out there with you each and every time. The Braves see themselves as the first-place team in the National League East, and they are. And they're going to go and battle the second-place team in the NL East, a club they know all too well in the New York Mets for the first time this year.
Yeah, Rocio Iglesias, by the way, made his first appearance of his rehab start AAA on Thursday, throwing 8 strikes on 12 pitches. I think things may be figured to get back to a little more stabilized in that bullpen. Everyone can kind of slot into their normal roles once he's back at the big league level. On a positive note in that Marlins series, I mean, there was Spencer Strider who flirted with a no-hitter while setting a franchise record with 9 straight games with at least 9 Ks. Vintage Charlie Morton. I think those are the things that really stood out on the mound in that series. Not to downplay Strider, who is second in the NL in strikeouts, but gems have kind of become the norm for him. I thought Morton's outing was maybe the most welcome sight. He struck out a season-high 9. His curveball, which opponents slugged .323 against last season, it's back to being a major weapon for him again. So consider these whiff rates on that pitch across his outings this season. It went from 10% against the Cardinals in his first outing. Then it jumped to 33%, 44%, 32%, and 42% in this most recent outing against the Marlins. It's just 5 starts, but he has a 120 average against that pitch in this season. That's Morton's best since 2021, second best over the last 7 seasons. Grant, this looks like a rejuvenated Charlie Morton with that biggest weapon working for him again.
Yeah, and you needed to see it, and it felt like it was in there somewhere, right? And he was looking for it, and the Braves were hoping that he was going to find it sooner than later, and clearly he has a big role to play in a rotation that was tested very early without Max Fried, without Kyle Wright for a moment, with a couple of rookies that started the year in the Braves rotation and have already ended up back down in AAA, and even with the return of Bryce Elder, which has certainly been way more good than bad, you needed Charlie Morton and Spencer Strider to step up, and I feel like they have done that thus far this year. Max Fried has also looked good. I loved what I was seeing from Kyle Wright in the finale against Miami, and I think if we're looking for reasons maybe that the game went wrong late, how about having to empty out your bullpen in that finale when you're in the middle of a string of 17 consecutive days or games without an off day, and you only get 3 innings out of your starter because of a 3-hour rain delay? That was not a recipe for success for the Braves if you really kind of break it down to brass tacks. Now, there's personal accountability and individual innings and all those other kind of things, and I know that's probably not what we want to sit here and do this whole episode on, but just thinking out loud, I did like what I saw from Kyle Wright, and you add that to Charlie Morton, add that to Spencer Strider, and I think those were encouraging signs to take out of this series against the Miami Marlins. I also saw one at the plate that I liked an awful lot. How about Eddie Rosario? 6 for 15 in this series, couple of homers off lefties, no less. I like what I'm seeing from Eddie Rosario of late.
Yeah, 3 games with extra base hits in a row for him. I think that's going to be an interesting storyline to watch. So you mentioned the innings the bullpen had to cover on Thursday as they now go and face the Mets for 4 games, which we're going to get into in a minute here. I think that's going to be an underlying storyline. They're going to have to watch that for without question as that series gets underway. As the first month of the season comes to a close, Ronald Acuña Jr. continues to simply be playing out of his mind. He's hitting .352 with a .995 OPS. His 170 weighted run created plus is the 3rd best of any full month of his career. So is his .431 weighted on base average. He's tied for the MLB lead within fWAR through 26 games, putting him on pace for a 12-3 fWAR season. Now, to put that in perspective, no one has posted a fWAR in the 12s since Barry Bonds in 2002. No Braves player has ever done it. I don't know that that's sustainable, but Grant, I think at least at this point, the argument can be made that rarely, if ever, have we seen Ronald Acuna Jr. playing better than he is right now.
Yeah, even when you go to 2021 and you just kind of look at, all right, he played about half a season. What if we double it? I don't think we were talking about a 12-plus win player, and that's really saying something. And I think it just speaks to the overall, the way that he is approaching his at-bats now, I think is as good and is locked in. And I know people are looking at the ground ball rate and saying, oh, he's not elevating the ball enough. And I think that's going to come with time also. So just stick a pin in all of that. But he is finding his way on base. He is putting up, I think, great plate appearances overall. His strikeout rate has been more than manageable. He is making plays with his legs, both on the bases and in the outfield. He's flashed that arm. It's just the things that we weren't seeing as much of last year. So maybe it's just a little bit of a reminder, a little bit of an appetizer, if you will, for what could be a main course that goes on all the way through the summer with a little nice, tasty dessert there if you can get some October magic going on. And Ronald Acuna Jr. gets to be in the middle of that. But I've been tracking this 40-40 thing, and I know it's not trending in that direction right now in terms of both sides and both columns, but Ronald Acuna Jr. coming into Thursday's finale was on pace for 26 home runs and 85 stolen bases. There have been two players in baseball history that have had 25 homers and 80-plus steals in a season. Ricky Henderson in 1986, Eric Davis in 1986, and that's the end of the list. It's crazy that it both happened in the same year, but that's the kind of thing Ronald's doing. Is he going to steal 80 bases? I don't know. But he's certainly capable of hitting the 30 to 40 home runs and really making himself the great all-around player, the five-tool guy that we expect to see. And I think this is just going to be, again, a reminder of just how great Ronald Acuna Jr. can be. And I don't even think that he's really gotten hot yet and gone on one of those nice home run binges that he has in the past. Once that starts happening, I think it's going to open up even more eyes.
Yeah, and I think the hard hit rates tell you that ultimately things are going to play out when you start looking at those ground. He keeps hitting the ball hard, good things are going to happen. And it really feels like this is Acuna in full right now. So you mentioned the steals. He has more steals than any month in his career right now. Meanwhile, FanGraphs fWAR splits, I found this crazy fascinating. Their splits only go back monthly to 1974. Since then, no Braves player has had a better first month of the season than Acuna at 1.9. The only one is equaled him is Chipper Jones in 1998, and Acuna has 3 more games to try to get above 1.9 before the end of April. And we're talking about the first Brave ever, at least in FanGraphs tracking, to get a 2-WAR April. So just an absolutely fascinating, fantastic start out of him. And he'll be looking to continue that as the Braves take on the rival Mets for a 4-game series beginning on Friday. Somewhat similar situation to what we saw a week ago. The Braves had an Astros team that, despite its players' resumes, was struggling. The Mets come into this after a series loss to the Nationals, which was Washington's first of the season against an NL opponent. The Mets dropped 4 in a row before rallying for a win on Thursday night of note, because they never lost 4 games in a row all of last season. Your pitching matchups for this one are going to be Max Fried and David Peterson on Friday, Spencer Strider and Tyler McGill on Saturday, Charlie Morton and Jose Butto on Sunday, and Bryce Elder against TBA on Monday. Grant, what's your top storyline for this 4-game set?
Well, I know this is just the first of the 13 times that these clubs are going to meet, but what were the odds that you were going to roll into this first meeting and that you weren't going to see Justin Verlander or Max Scherzer just for starters? We'll see what the final game might hold for the Braves and what exactly the Mets are going to do there, but it's a fascinating storyline, at least to me. And I do think that both of these clubs, as they get going, are going to be better than perhaps these little skids that they got into lately. The Braves had a chance to win 2 out of 3 against the Astros. They blew a couple of leads. That happens. And I'm quite certain that the New York Mets are probably a better team on paper and in practice than the Washington Nationals in most series. But this is baseball. You got to go out there and get all 27 outs, and sometimes things go sideways. And if you needed a reminder of that, well, Thursday was that, and we'll leave it in the past and move on into this. But I think the Braves had their rotation lined up the way that they want it to be. Can they get their lineup a little bit stronger? Is Michael Harris going to be back in this whole mix? He is also on a rehab assignment with Gwinnett, has now played a couple of games. That would certainly go a long way towards helping you get back to being the club that you kind of pictured yourself being when you broke camp in spring training. The Braves have played without a lot of players, but that's no excuse. So have the Mets, and they're currently doing it now just like the Braves are. So I'm interested to see maybe who the unsung heroes in this series are going to be, because, Corey, as we've seen between these two clubs, there always seems to be somebody that comes up big that may not necessarily have his name on the main marquee as you walk in and think about who could beat you and who is the best player on either side.
Yeah, you mentioned a little bit. I mean, this Mets pitching staff is absolutely riddled with injuries. It's Carlos Carrasco, along with Justin Verlander, Jose Quintana, Max Scherzer, obviously suspended. He's eligible to come back May 1st. Meanwhile, this Mets offense is just a little bit confounding. They're 19th in home runs, 16th in weighted on base average, 17th in OPS. They were outscored by the Nationals 9-1 in the first two games of that series and struck out 28 times in those losses. Francisco Lindor has the highest strikeout rate of his career. But I think this is interesting. In the Mets' 15 wins, they've hit 22 home runs. In 11 losses, they've had 5 homers. Meanwhile, the Braves their rotation has allowed the fewest homers in the National League. So the Mets have struggled to manufacture runs. They're 23rd in average with runners in scoring position. So if the Braves continue to limit the long ball, I think it's going to be really difficult for the Mets to get things going offensively in this series.
I agree. And the stats when the Braves hit home runs in bunches, they're typically winning games as well. So if Atlanta's able to take advantage of some of maybe the weak links in the chain for the Mets rotation, that would certainly bode well. But one thing I think we've noticed in the early going of this season, a handful of times now, is the Braves may score a whole bunch of runs in an inning, but then it seems like the offense kind of goes lights out later on. And I don't mean lights out in a good way. I mean lights out in a, hey, what exactly is going on here? Nobody can seem to get a hit to get these add-on runs that this club needs. A couple of those would have come in handy on Thursday. And I know it was a wonky game with a 3-hour rain delay in the middle, but we saw a couple of other times, particularly against the Astros in the game that Hunter Brown started and the Braves jumped all over him. Then they didn't get much else for the rest of that day if they got anything else. And that, I think, has kind of been something that the Braves obviously want to improve, hitting with runners in scoring position. They need to find a way to get Austin Riley going. He had a dreadful Thursday, not off to the start that I think he expected and many Braves fans are obviously looking for, but he's capable of breaking out and going on a hot streak, as we've seen in the past. One of those would certainly be nice. And if he wants to start it against New York, I don't think that too many Braves fans or the Braves themselves would complain about that.
Well, Mets-Braves was truly a defining rivalry a year ago. Atlanta winning 10-9 en route to that 5th straight National League East crown. These 4 games are just going to be the beginning. Remember, we've always got you covered here on BPTV, so be sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and help us spread the word to keep this thing going. Until next time, I'm Cory McCartney. He's Grant McAuley, and we'll see you soon, Braves Country.